if you look back at how we traditionally built enterprise software, the entire philosophy was built around strict, unyielding rails.
Right. Highly predictable.
Exactly. It was essentially a train on a track. I mean, you write the code, you deploy it, and that code executes the exact same way every single time.
Yeah, it's entirely deterministic. You input a specific variable, and, you get a highly specific predefined output.
Right, which is comforting.
It is. I mean,
Huh.
for the people running large organizations, that predictability is exactly how you pass compliance audits.
But then, you step into the world of generative AI over the last few years, and suddenly we took the train entirely off the tracks.
Oh, absolutely.
We essentially handed the keys to a sports car to a teenager in an empty parking lot. And it was amazing, right? It was creative, it could write code, it could draft emails, but it was completely stochastic.
Completely unpredictable.
Yeah. You would ask it to do a straightforward data pull, and it might decide to write you a poem about SQL databases instead.
Which was the absolute definition of an experimental chat phase. I mean, it was a fascinating technological toy.
Yeah.
But if you are managing a global financial institution, you are not going to bet your company's regulatory compliance on a system that might hallucinate a zero at the end of a transaction.
No, definitely not. Which brings us to why you are here with us for this deep dive today. Because if you've been tracking Amazon Bedrock this week specifically, I mean the wave of official updates that dropped between March 29th and April 4th, 2026, you are watching a massive paradigm shift.
It really is a definitive shift.
Generative AI is officially moving out of that experimental chat docs and into autonomous, heavily governed enterprise execution. I mean, we are looking at AI agents that now have persistent memory, agents that can execute their own shell commands, and agents that are locked down by strict organizational safety nets.
Yeah, what really stands out when you aggregate the news from this week is the systematic eradication of unpredictability. AWS is actively building a mathematically verifiable, highly controlled operating system for autonomous enterprise AI. I mean, they're putting the tracks back down, but this time the tracks are designed for vehicles that can think for themselves.
That's a great way to put it. But before we get into the heavy enterprise architecture and the code, we actually need to look at the humans.
The workforce.
Exactly. Because it doesn't matter how powerful a new operating system is if nobody knows how to build for it. So how is AWS ensuring there is a workforce actually capable of managing these agentic systems?
Well, it is a massive bottleneck for the industry right now. I mean, you can't just flip a switch and expect traditional software engineers to suddenly understand probabilistic agent workflows.
Right. And AWS actually addressed this directly on Monday, March 30th. On the AWS News blog and through Amazon Science, they announced a massive global initiative.
Yeah, the Scholars Program.
Right. They officially launched the 2026 AWS AI and ML Scholars Program, which is aimed at training up to 100,000 learners worldwide. And at the exact same time, they opened submissions for their spring 2026 Agentic AI research grants, which run through May 6th.
The scale of the capital being deployed here is what you should really pay attention to. For those research grants, they are offering up to $70,000 in unrestricted funds.
Wow.
Yeah. Plus an additional $50,000 in AWS promotional credits to selected principal investigators.
Okay, let's unpack this. Think of it like baseball, right? AWS isn't just building the Major League Stadium here. They are aggressively funding the minor leagues to ensure they have the talent to actually play the game a few years from now.
Yeah, the dual-pronged approach is brilliant because the Scholars Program requires zero prior machine learning experience.
Really, zero.
Zero. That is about democratizing baseline practical implementation skills at a massive scale. But then, the academic grants are targeting highly specific foundational theoretical research.
Right, the heavy stuff.
Exactly. We are talking about funding for advanced low-rank adaptation, or LoRA, specifically for text-to-speech models.
Okay, let's pause there for a second, because explain low-rank adaptation for someone who isn't spending their weekends reading machine learning white papers. What is the actual mechanism there?
Sure. So think of a massive AI model as a giant library of millions of thick, heavy books. Traditionally, if you wanted to teach the AI a new specific skill, you had to rewrite all the books.
Which takes forever.
Right? It took massive amounts of computing power and time. But low-rank adaptation essentially lets you slide a small, incredibly lightweight pamphlet into the library that updates the AI's knowledge.
Without touching the original books.
Exactly, without touching them at all. AWS is funding research to make that process even more efficient for voice generation. So by funding both the entry-level workforce and the bleeding-edge theorists simultaneously, they ensure the talent pool matures at the exact same time as the Bedrock platform itself.
That makes a lot of sense. But a trained workforce needs a robust, production-ready environment to actually build in. And this is where things get complicated, right? Because if you have agents running complex tasks autonomously, how do developers test them?
It's totally different from traditional software.
Right. You mentioned deterministic testing earlier. If a function returns a 4, it passes. If it returns a 5-foot, it fails. But an AI doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't at all.
Mhm.
An AI agent might achieve the goal of booking a commercial flight by using 3 different tools in a specific sequence. Or, it might achieve the exact same goal by using 5 different tools and taking twice as long.
But they both got the ticket.
Right. Both end states are technically successful, but one is vastly less efficient and costs way more in compute. You cannot deploy that into a live environment if you cannot systematically measure its reasoning.
Which makes the global release from the AWS machine learning blog on Tuesday, March 31st, a massive deal for engineering teams.
Oh, absolutely.
Amazon Bedrock AgentCore Evaluations has officially reached general availability. This is a fully managed service designed for the automated quality assessment of AI agents. And the specific metric that matters here is that it comes with 13 built-in evaluators.
Right, covering things like tool selection accuracy and overall goal success.
Exactly. But the mechanism they are using to achieve this is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, AgentCore Evaluations relies heavily on OpenTelemetry traces.
Wait, break that down for us. What is an OpenTelemetry trace actually doing in this context?
Okay, so imagine giving someone a map and asking them to drive to a destination. Traditional testing just checks if they parked the car at the right address at the end of the day.
Like a simple pass or fail.
Exactly. An OpenTelemetry trace puts a GPS tracker on the car, logs every single turn they made, notes every time they check the map, and records if they took a detour.
Oh, wow. So in the context of an AI agent.
The trace logs the exact sequence of thought, which database it queried first, what data it pulled, how it synthesized that data, and which API it called next.
That is incredibly detailed.
It is. AgentCore Evaluations takes that entire log journey and essentially uses another highly tuned LLM as a judge alongside deterministic code checks to score the agent's logic flow, not just its final answer.
So developers can continuously monitor how these agents are behaving in live production without having to spend 6 months building their own custom testing infrastructure.
Right. It's a massive operational shortcut.
But the updates to the AgentCore runtime get even deeper. Because on Thursday, April 2nd, AWS announced globally that AgentCore Runtime is adding managed session storage and shell command execution.
This is huge.
Yeah, agents can now persist their file system state across stop and resume cycles.
This changes the entire nature of what an agent is capable of. I mean, before this, agents were largely ephemeral.
Right.
They woke up, did a task, and when the session ended, everything they learned or downloaded just evaporated. Now they have up to 1 gigabyte of persistent storage.
Paint a picture of what that actually looks like for developer workflow.
Let's say you have an AI agent tasked with managing a massive code base. On Monday morning, the agent downloads a huge repository, runs a complex dependency check, and then goes idle to wait for human approval.
So it's just pausing.
Right. With persistent storage, it doesn't have to start over on Tuesday.
Sure.
The virtual machine state is maintained, the files are still there. It eliminates the massive compute waste of redundant setups for multi-day workflows.
Okay, but look, here's where it gets really interesting, but also a little scary. If you're an IT admin or security architect listening to this, handing root access and shell command execution to an AI probably makes your blood run cold.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
I mean, if an agent can execute commands like npm install or push code directly to a repository, aren't we essentially handing a loaded weapon to a stochastic black box?
It is the most valid concern you could have in enterprise AI right now. I mean, opening a terminal and letting a probabilistic model type whatever it wants is a recipe for disaster.
Because it could just wipe a drive?
It's exactly. But AWS is heavily mitigating this by forcing the model into rigid deterministic pathways. The agent is strictly constrained by tool definitions and schemas. It isn't just hallucinating commands into a void.
That ties perfectly into the update we saw on Wednesday, April 1st. On the AWS What's New feed, they announced that Amazon Bedrock structured outputs are expanding natively into the AWS GovCloud regions in the US.
Yes.
And this forces the model's responses to strictly comply with predetermined JSON schemas.
Right. Think about the legacy databases used by defense contractors, or federal agencies. Those systems are incredibly brittle. They parse data in highly specific formats.
Yeah, they don't do well with unexpected inputs.
Not at all.
Sure.
If an AI decides to be helpful and prefaces its data output with a conversational string like, here is the financial data you requested, before outputting the code, that legacy parser will immediately crash.
Because it's expecting a nested JSON bracket, not a friendly greeting.
Exactly. Structured outputs solve this. They act as rigid pipes. The AI might do all the complex probabilistic thinking in the background, but the output is forced through a rigid template.
So highly regulated government workloads can now confidently integrate generative AI because the agent is mathematically constrained to speak like a traditional predictable API.
Right.
But giving an AI terminal access and persistent memory means we still need intense perimeter control. You cannot deploy an agent across a massive global enterprise without centralized security.
No, you can't.
I mean, if every decentralized development team is setting their own safety rules, you are going to have a catastrophic breach.
You would have a compliance nightmare on your hands within hours. A team in marketing might spin up an agent with a completely different risk profile than a team in human resources.
Right. Which brings us to Friday, April 3rd. The AWS News blog announced the global general availability of Amazon Bedrock Guardrails cross-account safeguards.
This is critical for enterprise adoption.
Yeah, security teams can now define a single safety policy in their AWS organization's management account, and it automatically enforces that policy across all member accounts.
The scale of enforcement is the critical metric here. This system actively blocks up to 88% of harmful multimodal content organization-wide.
88%. That's massive.
It is, because it uses top-down AWS organizations' inheritance.
Right.
A rogue development team cannot bypass corporate safety standards. You define the guardrail once at the top of the corporate hierarchy, and it trickles down to every single Bedrock invocation in the company.
But the problem with massive company-wide guardrails is that they can sometimes be too blunt, right? I mean, if the filter is too aggressive, the AI can't actually do its job.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Which brings us to another update from April 3rd via the global AWS SDK changelogs. Amazon Bedrock Guardrails introduces selective guarding configuration. SDK updates now allow developers to apply entirely different safety control thresholds to internal system prompts versus external user messages.
This is a highly elegant solution to the industry-wide problem of over-refusal.
Break down over-refusal for us.
Over-refusal happens when an AI is so heavily guarded that it refuses safe, legitimate requests because it misinterpreted a keyword. The filter's just too tight.
Let me try an analogy here. So selective guarding is essentially like an airport security line.
Okay.
The system prompts, the core instructions written by your trusted developers, are the pilots and the flight crew. They get TSA pre-check. They get to bypass the heaviest filters so they can do their jobs effectively.
Right.
But the user inputs, the prompts coming from the general public, are the standard passengers. They still have to take their shoes off, empty their pockets, and go through the full scanner.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. You do not want your toxicity filter accidentally blocking the agent's core operating instructions.
No, just break to the app.
Exactly. You want the agent to have full, unencumbered visibility into its own rules while maintaining maximum rigorous scrutiny on whatever unpredictable text the end user is typing into the chat box.
That makes total sense for public-facing apps. But what about when an agent needs to access my personal, internal corporate data?
That's a different beast entirely.
Yeah. That takes us to two deeply technical updates from April 1st and April 3rd in the global SDK changelogs. Amazon Bedrock AgentCore introduced support for three-legged oath for delegated access alongside VPC egress through managed VPC lattice resources.
This is where we see the absolute completion of a strict zero-trust architecture for AI.
Zero trust is the key word there.
Right. Historically, when developers built AI applications, they often used broad machine-level service accounts. The AI essentially had a master key to the database.
Which is terrifying.
Extremely. Because if that agent gets compromised, the attacker has access to everything the machine has access to, which violates the fundamental cybersecurity principle of least privilege.
So make three-legged oath make sense for us. How does the handoff actually work to prevent that master key scenario?
Well, the three legs are the user, the identity provider, and the agent. When you interact with the agent, the system kicks off a handshake. You authenticate yourself. The identity provider verifies who you are and then hands the AI agent a temporary token.
Okay, a temporary token.
Right, and that token is stamped with your exact corporate clearance level. The agent essentially adopts your specific identity for that session. It is physically incapable of reading an email or a financial record that you yourself do not have permission to read.
Oh, wow. So it's no longer a generic machine account. It is acting as my digital proxy.
Exactly.
And how does the VPC Lattice resource factor into this?
VPC Lattice acts as an invisible, highly controlled private tunnel inside your corporate network.
Yeah.
Even though the AI agent is hosted on AWS, when it needs to reach back into your proprietary on-premise database to grab those financial records, it travels through this managed private tunnel.
Oh, so it's not on the open web.
Right, the traffic never traverses the public internet. It is entirely isolated.
So step back and look at the foundation we've unpacked here. We have a trained workforce. We have agents with persistent memory and shell access. We have structured outputs acting as rigid pipes.
Yeah.
We have centralized guardrails, human-level identity tokens, and private network tunnels. I mean, they have built an absolute fortress.
They really have.
But the ultimate validation of this architecture is whether massive, highly regulated enterprises are actually willing to put this into production and bet their bottom line on it.
Absolutely. A theoretical framework is useless if it cannot survive the friction of real-world commerce.
Right. And between March 30th and April 2nd, AWS released 3 massive proofs of concept on their machine learning blog and through various press releases.
Yes, the enterprise case studies.
Exactly. Ring has scaled their global customer support using Bedrock knowledge bases. Siemens Energy integrated Bedrock to modernize their physical power grid stability and heavy manufacturing. And Rocket Close automated their massive mortgage document processing pipelines.
The Rocket Close deployment is the one that truly demands attention because of the raw metrics. I mean, we aren't talking about a sandbox pilot program here.
No, these are real numbers.
They achieved 15 times faster document processing. They took a workflow that used to take 30 minutes per package and reduced it to under 2 minutes while maintaining 90% accuracy.
Okay, so what does this all mean? Because that raises a massive operational question. If you are processing mortgages, you are dealing with incredibly strict federal lending laws.
Right.
You are dealing with people's homes. If a Bedrock agent makes a hallucinated decision on a mortgage rate or misreads a critical financial digit, who is legally responsible? Is it the company Rocket Close or is it AWS?
Under the shared responsibility model for cloud computing and generative AI, the customer, in this case Rocket Close, always owns their data and always owns the final business outcome.
Always.
Always. AWS provides the highly secure infrastructure. They do not provide an underwriting guarantee for your loans.
Which means the company is taking on massive risk.
They are, but your question highlights exactly why the granular updates from this specific week are so vital. Rocket Close isn't just asking a generic chatbot to read a mortgage application and hoping for the best.
Right, they're using the Rails.
Exactly. They're using the strict JSON tool specifications. They're relying on the cross-account organizational safeguards to prevent data leakage. By enforcing deterministic boundaries around a probabilistic model, an enterprise like Rocket Close can mitigate that legal and operational risk down to an acceptable baseline.
But what about that 10% gap in accuracy? You mentioned they are hitting 90%. What happens to the other 10%?
That is where the workflow fundamentally changes. You design the system with human-in-the-loop fallback mechanisms.
Okay.
The AI agent acts autonomously to handle the 90% routine repetitive work. When it encounters a complex edge case or, a document that falls outside its structured parameters, it flags the file and routes it to a human underwriter.
So the humans aren't replaced, their jobs just change.
Right? The human workforce shifts away from tedious data entry and moves entirely into exception management and strategic oversight.
It fundamentally changes the economics of the business. If you synthesize everything we've covered from this singular week of AWS releases, you see a complete transformation of the technology.
A total maturation.
Yeah, Amazon Bedrock is aggressively moving from generative art and chat toys into a locked-down, highly measurable operating system where agents act securely and autonomously on our behalf.
The crucial foundational blocks are finally in place. I mean, we have workforce education, deterministic logic testing, persistent execution environments, and zero-trust security perimeters.
Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week. We started this deep dive by talking about the danger of giving a teenager the keys to a sports car.
Who did?
But look at the architecture we just explored. If an AI agent now has a persistent file system memory that survives the system shutdown, if it has the ability to execute its own shell commands in a terminal, and if it holds its own distinct digital identity through a 3-legged OAuth token, Yeah. At what point do we stop treating these agents as traditional software as a service and start managing them legally, functionally, and organizationally as synthetic employees as a service?
That is a paradigm shift that is going to redefine corporate structures much faster than most organizations are prepared for.
It absolutely will. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the evolving world of Bedrock. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.